Nandini, without wasting a lot of time, I think I'm going to get straight to the first question I had for you, because
Yes.
you've been writing for so many years. You've been writing since the 1990s, long before we even had so many lit fests or children's awards or even so many children's publishers. But over the last decade, the landscape has really changed a lot. So as a writer, what are some of the things that have become easier for you and some that have possibly become a bit more challenging?
So yeah, my first story was published, I remember, in the December of 1999. So that was the beginning. And I went on to write a whole lot of stories. And what I would say, in the first book was Pranav's Picture, which was in 2005. And I think what was different then was that, email and the internet was very new. So I think that the availability of information was a real a question right then. So you didn't know of publishing houses. There were very few. And I remember having to visit bookshops to even get to know who were the new writers writing, what were they writing about. And I usually came away with emails and stuff like that. And I still remember when I sent the first two stories to Tulika in 2004, I had to send it by hard copy. And there was no means of knowing if they had even reached. But when they got accepted, I got an email saying that they've been accepted. So I think in that way, if you look at ease of getting information about new publishing houses or even contacts at these publishing houses, or even the submission, which is by email now in most cases, I think in almost all cases, things have really improved. Unfortunately, I think the wait time is continues to be the same for most authors. They'll agree that, after, from the point when you send the email, there is still that uncertainty and you often end up waiting for a lot of time. So that is to do with the very practical side of how things have changed since the time when I began writing. I think in terms of what it means, otherwise, the number of publishing houses that we have now, publishing primarily for children, that's a really wonderful thing, because that means that you do get to write a lot more. You do get to write different kinds of stories that you're writing. Another very big difference I see is when I set out to write, there was no thought in my mind except that I wanted to see if I could write a story for children. That was when I was writing my first story. So there was no thought, no questions that I ticked off in my mind about, am I going to put it in a very recognizably Indian cultural context and background, and what kind of social milieu is going to be represented? What kind of language am I going to use? It was something that came organically when I sat down to write. The story was the most important thing. And therefore, whatever seemed to me to add to the story is what went into it. So I think that for a lot of writers who were writing at that time, and I know that this is what worked for me, the story became important, and there weren't any major theoretical questions being addressed in your mind or battled over in your mind before you wrote it. What shall I make? I think of it as a very, very regular, everyday, I think I would say Indian or Asian kind of story, because it is about a mother making rotis and the child playing with a ball of dough. And I think that at that point, I wasn't thinking, hey, I'm going to educate the world about the kinds of breads that we eat in India, or what Indian women do, or what Indian people eat. It was just a story born out of this actual interaction with my son. And that's what I wrote. So I think now for a lot of writers who have been reading these kinds of stories, there is no question in their minds. It is kind of set what they want to do. Of course, they do still have their own choices to make. But I think for when I began and up to now, I think with myself, this is what I see, that I began with this very basic intention of wanting to tell a story, and everything else resolved itself because the story became important. The narrative had to be adapted to get the story across.
So, I mean, in terms of also, it's also become a lot more competitive now, right? With so many books and so many publishers and so many writers. Does that sometimes affect you in any way? Or, I mean, sometimes people feel that, there are just so many books coming out, it's hard to keep track. So
I don't know about whether it's hard to keep track, but I think sometimes that, there's a certain perception that if someone has been writing for too long, there is a certain perception of her as, you are sort of classified and put into these boxes. And I think also there's a lot of focus on giving opportunities to new voices. I don't see why giving opportunities to new voices should mean excluding or marginalizing those who've been around for long. But sometimes, I think if it comes to a choice, and given the fact that budgets aren't that great, I do think that maybe publishers have to make that very difficult choice. So that way, yes.
But so Nandini, you started writing, as you said, in 2005, Pranav's Picture, your first book. And after that, I mean, you've now got more than 60 books, and you've written over a very long period of time. So how do you find your own voice as an author changing with time?
I don't think
writing life. Sorry, I mean, like if I voice or writing life, whichever you feel has sort of felt had a stronger change in it.
So when I began writing, it was born out of this very, like I said, the interaction with my own son. So I had a subject matter close at hand, and as he grew, I was eavesdropping on his conversation and what was happening at school, and a lot of what I wrote was inspired by that, and also with memories of my own growing up year. I think now I find that the areas of inspiration, the fields of inspiration have really grown wider. Like I found, I've always been interested in the kitchen, but earlier the kitchen was just a place that you went to, a very functional place. But over the years, I've discovered how much food can mean, all the things that it can do. And I find increasingly that a lot of my ideas, they come to me when I'm in the kitchen, and I think it reflects in what I write, because I discovered at a recent count, very idly, I was just thinking how many books have I written on food, and it turned out I think I've got 8 or 10 books, and I had no clue that I had written that many. But I think in my writing life, I would say again that the areas of inspiration aren't any longer restricted to just maybe one child or to whatever is there. Things have widened. I am looking also at families. I'm looking at relationships. I'm looking at things that other parents are going through, other children are going through. And the thing is that, for any writer, this is only the beginning. This can never be the whole story or the whole reason you write a story. The fact that you take a pause and you look around and you think and consider what is happening, that's just a starting point. And from there, you come up with the story idea, and then you people it with characters who say the kinds of things that you think are important. So I think that my writing life as such has changed in this way. I think my voice has remained pretty much sort of focused on the everyday, which I think is the most exciting thing in our life. I think that what happens around us, even if it is something very ordinary, I think that as a writer, if you really put your gaze on it and think about it, everything has the potential to energize you, to give you an idea for a story. And that's pretty much what has happened. That's how it started. When I started with the short stories that I published, they were stories about sibling relationships, about going to school and best friends and little quarrels and things which to the adult gaze seem very trivial and not really important, but I think for children they are very important. And if you look at the picture books that I've done, if you look at Nilu's a big box, which is about a girl who finds a big box and she is constantly innovating and trying to decide what she wants to do with it. Or if you take My Grandfather's Stick, which is about a girl and her grandfather's stick and the many uses she finds for it. I think that the gaze has pretty much remained on the everyday. For even if you look at the book that I have for older children, the books, Camp Sweets and the Curious Case of the Sweet and Spicy Sweet Shop, both of these are again, they are sort of adventure stories, but they are set in this very ordinary, everyday, regular world. And even though there are ghosts in the sweet shop book, the ghosts are also not doing any supernatural things or trying to frighten anyone. They also are totally caught up in the everyday, and their focus is on, the arrival of this boy who can herald a new beginning for the shop. So I think that pretty much, it's remained the same. Maybe like I said, my areas of inspiration have increased. That's about
still
it.
Pretty much, as you say, a large body of your work as a writer, Nandini, is pretty much borrowed from the everyday, from experiences which are very easy to place in any middle class family. And you yourself have given so many examples, so I probably won't delve into those. But Nandini, have you ever, I mean, I know, like, for instance, when the Harry Potter books came out, a lot of writers were like, we'll try something with magic, something around building new worlds. And, when these phenomenons happen within children's publishing, they inspire people and then prompt people to try new things. Has something of that sort ever happened to you, or have you pretty much been happy in this space? And because I don't really see that happening too much, I'm just really curious to know if you've ever felt like maybe you need to try dabbling your hands. I know you've done a few things. There was one book with Juggernaut that you wrote, which
Yeah.
was
Don't Tell Your Mother.
Don't Tell Your Mother. Yeah, which was
Yes.
horror, which was completely different from Nandini Nayar.
No, I have done horror. In fact, I love writing horror stories. I have a book called The Girl in the Mirror, which I published with Mango, a collection of horror stories. So I actually love writing horror. But the Harry Potter kind of world has never really convinced me, because I think that I'm too grounded in the realities of everyday world. And I don't, I don't see the need to create a new world outside of this world, because this itself has enchantment aplenty, in every corner of it. So you just need to look carefully for that enchantment. So I've never felt really that I want to have magic if I ever write a story with magic. And I think a very little bit of it comes in the sweet shop book, because of the presence of
Yes.
the ghost. But again, like I said, they also operate within only the framework of the everyday. I don't see them doing like miraculous things or making things appear and disappear.
Hmm.
So I have not been tempted. I am not very happy
Good.
here.
So at least we know what we can sort of expect out of Nandini,
Yes.
Nandini Nayar. But Nandini, also the everyday is something which changes, right?
Yeah.
History changes our everyday. Maybe as writers, we are more conscious of it because we are living it and noting it. And in your case, you are building stories around it. And you did say that, the everyday is also changing. And the things that you observe around you are also changing. So, to come to your book, Sometimes Mama, Sometimes Papa, I know a lot has been said about it being a book of a child, of Nandini Nayar veering away from the usual narrative to write on a
Has
difficult
it?
subject and, so on and
Okay.
so forth. But I also, I mean, genuinely feel that our social fabric is changing. And today, maybe compared to, for instance, when you wrote your first story, which was back in 2005, when the first story got published, not when you wrote it. I'm sure you must have written a lot more before that. But it is become more common to see children living in single parent households. So was this, I mean, was this based on your own experience or something you have observed? I just want to probe a little bit about the genesis of this particular book, Nandini.
So I wasn't aware, by the way, that this book was being seen as my attempt to tackle a difficult topic. I think every single book you write is difficult in its own way. It brings its own challenges, because you always have a vision in your head. You always have a picture in your head of the story you want to tell and of the characters you want to put in. And the big challenge is translating them and bringing them, safely from that space in your mind onto paper. So that aside, I didn't know that Sometimes Mama, Sometimes Papa was being looked at in that way. For me, I never set out to write about a difficult topic, because the topic or the theme or the issue is never, ever, ever the starting point of any story. Stories come in different forms. Inspiration for them come in different ways. Like some stories, the sweet shop came to me as a picture in my mind of a dull gray sky, and it raining, and a thin man looking very anxious and sad. And I wanted to know why he looked so sad. And because I love the rain, and I was like, why is he so sad? And he lives above a sweet shop, so what's making him unhappy? And that's how that story came about. And there are other stories which came about, they started with as a phrase in my head, and I wrote them. So with Sometimes Mama, Sometimes Papa, it is like I said, that you, as you grow as a writer, you do start looking at and noticing things. You've been noticing them, but you haven't really sat down to think about it. So I think around the time that I wrote this, I was thinking a lot about relationships. I was looking at not just relationships close to me of my friends or other people, but also of the senior members of the family. Of you read in the newspapers of all these kinds of issues, and it always made me think about what like what were the dynamics in that family, what was happening. And there's always this thing, I think, about once a child is born, there's a sort of expectation from the mother about what she is expected to do or what are her duties. And it made me wonder if in every upbringing of every child, where what were the roles played by both the parents. And it was sort of a way to think through this problem, because I've discovered that many of the things that bother me, when I write about them, they sort of give me a lot of clarity. And I was working my way through this, and I wrote a huge number of drafts of the story. And then I realized that it made no sense to have to say that one particular side did more, or one particular parent was more important, because in the writing of the story, what emerges is, I think, what is at the heart of any parenting relationship, that finally it's the child who's the most important. So I think that's what has really been the reason for my writing this story, not so much about um, families which are broken up, because even if the parents are together, very often the demands of their jobs are such that one parent is probably not even seen by the child if he or she works the night shift, or and is asleep during the day. So it was just about what is being done. And if you look at it again, the focus is the child, and the focus is still the everyday, because the child is not worried about this big question about of what is going to happen to me. The child is worried about, and the other children are also concerned about, like, what about your books, what about your toys, where are you going to stay? And the child is also the big question is, like, who's going to come when there's a parent teacher meeting, which is a concern of any child, no matter what kind of family the child comes from. And when the child is finally being sort of forced to make a choice between the father and the mother, like any other child who knows she's loved, she refuses to make a choice. She wants both, because you show a child two toys and ask them to choose, or two bars of chocolate, they're going to want to grab both of it, which is the really childlike response to a situation like that. And that's what I have my character in the story do, that she just refuses to choose. And I think with that, the parents also recognize the fact that it is the child who is at the heart of everything, and whatever is being done is for the child.
So, Nandini, you have very consciously kept away from using the word divorce in this
Yes.
story anyway. So, is
Yes.
it because you didn't want to make the book sound like, sort of you want, I mean, was this a conscious choice basically?
Yeah, I never wrote it. You see, that's a funny thing. I never had a divorced a couple in mind when I wrote it. I wanted to write about any relationship, and then it was like, okay, so it's a very a real problem of writing in a house if you are going to have the child looking to see which parent is doing more, though actually children do notice a lot, and they do notice all of these things. So which was why it was when they started living separately was used. But I did not use the word divorce, because I don't think that parents necessarily have to live apart because they have separated or are going through a divorce. It could be because of a variety of reasons. Like I said, the demands of a job, the demands of family, where you may have to go take care of someone else and you are away from your child. So what happens then? So I did not write it like this, but a lot of people have come up to me and said that the book has helped them and their child. And I think I feel very I feel very glad that it has helped them, and I hope it will help more people. But um, you know that wasn't really my intention, and all I wanted to do was to really focus on the child, and to sort of it was my own understanding of what was going through, what was happening to so many women around the world, where they're forced to kind of take a decision and sort of maybe step back from their work and concentrate on the child. And it was that which prompted me to write the book.
But overwhelmingly, Nandini, because I've been reading some of the book's reviews online and by people, they do sort of say that, I mean, most people seem to identify it with this. So I've always seen that what happens is, as writers, you'll start writing from a particular point of view, and then readers will interpret it very
Yes.
differently. So I think that has really in many ways been the case in this particular book for you, I think, because
Yes, it has been, which I think, I think that after you write a book, you it's no longer yours. It does belong to the world, it does belong to the reader, and each reader takes away from it something very different. So I am not asking the readers to not see this in it. If it gives them comfort, please, I'm really happy, because I know that writing it gave me a lot of comfort. So I really hope it gave me a lot of understanding. It really made me feel a lot more settled and calm and less angry about what women do go through. So if it has given you any kind of comfort, I am very happy. But I also think that this is primarily because I did not set out with the agenda of writing it. I think that is primarily the reason why. Maybe I think that when you set out with an agenda, your agenda shines forth much stronger than the story. For me, the story and the child in the story were primary. It's not even the parents, because the parents are adults, they have taken their decisions, but it is the small things for the child which matter. And for me, those really are very, very big. I know how they can stay in the child's mind and make them very scared and uncomfortable. And for me, that is really important. I really feel that very much. So if it has comforted people who have read it and they feel they can identify with it, I'm very happy. I'm really glad to know that.
But has it happened before with you where, I know we've been talking and you say that it has happened quite a bit with this book, but has it happened, because you've written so many of them, with, some of the other books where the narrative probably would have been somewhat simpler, where you've seen that you've written something and readers have taken something entirely different out of it. Has that happened so strongly for any of the other books that you
So
have?
I recently came across someone on some social media platform who read Where is Amma, which it's very popular with children and parents alike, because it touches on a very real anxiety of children if they don't see their mother. And that's how always people have talked about it. And but I read this person who talked about how she used this book to sort of wean her child who was too dependent on her, and to help her understand that she has to be alone like the boy in the story. So I hadn't thought of it that way at all. I mean, no one so far had written to me saying that this book could be used to make a child feel independent and to realize that he or she had a different life of their own. So I think, like I said, each of these books does speak to children differently, to readers very differently. Like the Apurva books that I've written, a lot of women have told me that this is their story, and they have faced body shaming several times in their lives. And they wish that they had read this book when they were kids, and they wish they were as strong as Apurva. So I think, I never wrote it for adults. I wanted it for children, to make them stronger. And this is a bonus that I hadn't anticipated, I hadn't looked for. So I'm really happy that that happened.
So Nandini Nayar is staying firmly in the space of children's publishing and tackling all the difficult things she wants to write about
Yes.
uh, within the children's space.
Yeah.
What is
Yeah.
the biggest challenge, Nandini? Sometimes, I feel like, many people come, although I just hate that this sort of very token term, difficult subject, because
Mm.
what might sound difficult to you might simply be difficult because that's not your lived reality.
Yeah.
But it may be very everyday for somebody else.
Yes.
So, what is your biggest challenge? Were there times when you were writing this book where you actually struggled with some bits of it? Were there portions which you probably, because you said you've written and rewritten this particular book. So, what was it that you struggled, a fair bit with when you were writing this one?
I think the biggest struggle was to not point fingers at any one party in the story, and to say that this person is to blame for what has happened, or this person hasn't done as much. Basically, to not discuss a relationship in based on the weighing scale thing. This person does this, so this person is doing this to compensate, but then this person does it. So it was it was the biggest challenge was to make sure that I did not talk about the people, the parents in the story in that light. Because very often what happens is you aren't aware, but whatever you have observed and whatever you have sort of seen, and it stays in your mind, very often that comes out in your story, and you end up creating characters who are unnecessarily, it's very unnecessarily harshly represented. And I wanted to be very careful that I don't do it, because the relationship is such that there can be no right and wrong. There is no one person does more and one person does less and not, because you are essentially looking at the story like this is not a manual on divorce or on relationships, or it's not meant for adults. It is meant for children. And you don't want to talk to children about how much one has done and how less the other has. You want to reassure them that doesn't matter, all of these things don't matter. They're both doing their things, they're both doing whatever they can, and they're going to be there for you. So that balance was, it was a challenge. It was definitely a challenge.
But it's nevertheless a challenge that you have maneuvered with a lot of grace, Nandini.
Thank you.
And I really like the way the refrain, sometimes mama, sometimes papa, or sometimes papa, sometimes mama, has been used throughout the book.
Yeah.
I think since you write from the everyday, one can expect that as your own everyday changes, maybe your subjects will also change, and we might expect many more such interesting themes being explored by you in the coming years, Nandini.
Thank you.
Looking forward to reading more, and all the best with the award. A huge thank you to you and to Bangalore Literature Festival for having us in conversation.
Thank you.
I think, yes, we should. I'm just seeing if there's anything from the audience. Not really, but yes, I've got an indication that our session is almost ending. So
okay, we'll say bye then. And
yes.
If anyone has any questions or wants to share anything, you can always reach me on any of the, through my social media handles, and I'll be very happy to talk to you. And thank you, Bangalore Literature Festival. Thank you for nominating this book. The readers of Atta Galatta, apparently they are the ones who shortlisted this. So that makes me really happy, because, this is like an award in itself, to know that readers read it and felt that this was good. So thank you, the readers who read this book of mine, Sometimes Mama, Sometimes Papa, and thought it was worthy to go on this lovely short list. And Subodh for letting me pick my time, the person, and the format of this discussion, and Meghaa for agreeing to do it. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you both. Thank you both